The morning began with pressure already sitting on Ethan Miller's chest as he hurried through the glass doors of the downtown Chicago office tower, knowing this meeting could decide his future at the company, knowing his boss, Claire Reynolds, was already upstairs preparing to face investors who demanded confidence and results, and knowing that being late today was not an option, yet fate had its own plans, because the moment Ethan stepped into the elevator, the lights flickered, the car jolted, and then stopped completely, trapping him between floors with a dull mechanical hum that felt like a warning, and when the doors finally opened again, it was not on any floor, but between them, forcing everyone inside to step out awkwardly into the stairwell while a warning sign blinked red, announcing that the elevators were down across the building, 20 floors high, no exceptions, no shortcuts, only stairs. And as people began rushing upward in panic, Ethan tightened his tie and prepared himself for a long climb, until he heard a familiar calm voice behind him saying, "Well, this is not ideal," and he turned to see Claire standing there, elegant as always in a tailored navy suit. Except today something was wrong, because she leaned slightly against the wall, her jaw tight, her foot angled carefully as if pain lived there, and Ethan noticed the broken heel instantly. The thin piece snapped clean, leaving her shoe useless, her ankle swollen just enough to tell a story she did not want to explain, and though she tried to step forward with dignity, her body betrayed her with a sharp breath and a quick grab at the railing, and in that moment the powerful executive everyone respected became just a woman stuck in a stairwell with no way up. And Ethan felt the urgency double, because without Claire the meeting would fail, and without the meeting the team might lose everything they had worked for, and he knew she would never ask for help, not like this, not from someone who reported to her. So before she could hide the pain with words, he spoke first, quietly but clearly, offering what felt impossible and yet completely natural. "I can carry you," and the words echoed louder in his head than in the stairwell, and Claire froze, her eyes lifting to his with surprise, confusion, and something softer beneath the professional mask, because no one had offered her help in years, not real help, not the kind that meant taking weight, without asking for anything back, and she searched his face as if trying to find a reason to say no, but time was running out. Footsteps thundered past them, voices faded upward, and the clock kept ticking. So after a long breath, she nodded, trusting him in a way she rarely trusted anyone, and when Ethan bent down and lifted her carefully, he felt the sudden truth of responsibility settle into his arms, her weight real, her presence close, her hand gripping his shoulder for balance, and the stairwell grew quiet as if the world paused to watch this moment, and with the first step upward, Ethan felt the burn begin almost immediately, his legs protesting, his lungs tightening, but he kept moving, because stopping was not an option, and as he climbed floor after floor, the sound of his breathing mixed with the soft rhythm of Claire's, and he became aware of details he had never noticed before, the faint scent of her perfume, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing as she realized he would not drop her, the way her fingers relaxed once she trusted his strength, and though neither of them spoke much, the silence was heavy with meaning, filled with thoughts they did not dare voice, Claire thinking about how strange it felt to depend on someone again, how long it had been since anyone carried her forward without expecting control in return, and Ethan thinking about how every step felt like a choice, how this was not just about a meeting anymore, but about proving something to himself he had never tested before. And by the time they reached the 10th floor his muscles shook, sweat soaked his collar, and his breath came sharp, yet he did not slow, because every time he felt himself weaken, he remembered the quiet way Claire had trusted him without argument, and that trust became fuel, pushing him higher, step by step, until finally the numbers on the wall climbed toward 20, and when the doors to the meeting floor came into view, Ethan summoned everything he had left and carried her through, arriving just as the last attendees took their seats, and the room fell silent for a split second as all eyes turned toward them, the unexpected image of a junior employee carrying the company's strongest leader, and in that pause, something changed, not just in the room, but between them, because Claire looked at Ethan with gratitude she did not hide, and when he gently set her down, steadying her until she was safe, she touched his arm briefly and whispered, "Thank you," with a weight that carried far more than the words themselves. And as Ethan stepped back, heart racing, arms aching, he realized that the broken elevator had done more than delay a meeting. It had cracked open, a moment neither of them would ever forget. A moment where power shifted, walls lowered, and something quiet, but powerful began to grow. Right there in the space between 20 floors and one unspoken truth. By the time Ethan reached the 5th floor with Claire still in his arms were trembling and sweat streaked his face. But he refused to stop, refusing to let exhaustion slow him, because he could see her trying to mask her discomfort, the sharp lines of pain in her ankle hidden behind the calm, professional smile she always wore. And as he continued, step after step, he felt a strange closeness growing between them, an intimacy born of trust and shared struggle. A quiet understanding that went beyond the usual office hierarchy, and Claire, for the first time in years, allowed herself to breathe without pretense, noticing the steady rhythm of his movements, the gentle way he adjusted her weight to ease her strain, the small, unnoticed things that made him more than just a colleague. And when she tried to speak, her voice soft and almost shy, she said, "You can put me down." But Ethan shook his head, smiling slightly despite the burn in his muscles. "No, we'll make it," he said, and in that simple refusal there was care, determination, and something unspoken that neither of them fully understood yet. And as they climbed past the 10th floor, passing the midpoint of the stairwell, every landing became a small victory, every step a testament to endurance, and Claire's mind wandered through memories of late nights at the office, achievements that never felt complete, the loneliness of success, and now here she was, carried safely, reminded that strength could come from unexpected places, that help could arrive when least expected. And Ethan, meanwhile, felt emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel, noticing the way her hand rested lightly on his shoulder, how her gaze softened when she looked at him, how her presence made every strained muscle worth it. And though they spoke little, each glance and each breath carried meaning, a silent conversation of trust and connection. And when he paused for a brief second to catch his own breath, Claire looked up at him with something tender in her eyes, a mix of surprise, gratitude, and an unfamiliar warmth. And it struck him that titles, positions, and office rules vanished in moments like this, replaced by the human reality of vulnerability and support. And as they neared the 15th floor, the stairwell seemed less like a path to a meeting and more like a shared journey, each step a metaphor for patience, endurance, and the small acts that reveal character. And by the 18th floor, Ethan's arms ached unbearably, but he noticed Claire watching him, quietly encouraging him, her hand tightening briefly as if to say, "I believe in you." And he realized that carrying her was not just about getting to the top, it was about being present, being steady, showing care without expectation. And through that simple act, both felt something shift, a closeness that was gentle yet electric, profound yet subtle. And when they finally reached the 20th floor, Ethan pushed open the final door, muscles trembling but spirit unbroken, and gently lowered her into a chair, careful to support her fully. And for a moment, silence enveloped them, the meeting forgotten, the world outside irrelevant. As Claire looked at him, eyes soft and full of emotion, whispering a quiet "thank you" that seemed to carry years of unspoken feelings. And Ethan, chest heaving, realized that this journey, these 20 floors of effort, struggle, and quiet connection, had changed something between them forever, laying the foundation for a bond that was deeper than office politics, stronger than fear, and full of possibilities neither had anticipated, proving that sometimes, the smallest acts of care can create the strongest emotional impact. And that trust, intimacy, and a simple willingness to be there for someone can become unforgettable, lasting memories that linger long after the moment itself has passed. The days after that staircase incident felt different for both Ethan and Claire, as if the shared moment had left an invisible thread connecting them in ways neither expected. And though the office carried on with its usual rush of deadlines, meetings, and email notifications, every glance between them now held a subtle weight. Claire noticing the way Ethan stayed calm under pressure, the quiet way he handled challenges, the little gestures no one else saw, like offering her coffee without being asked, or holding the door when she carried a stack of files. And Ethan, meanwhile, caught himself observing her differently, not as the distant, untouchable boss who commanded respect with sharp words and immaculate suits, but as a human being who bore responsibility with grace and a hint of loneliness, a woman whose smiles were rare treasures, whose laughter was soft but genuine, and whose eyes, when they met his, sometimes lingered longer than office decorum allowed. and it was during these small shared moments that a tension began to form, quiet and electric, an awareness of feelings unspoken yet impossible to ignore, and though both struggled to keep the professional barrier intact, the human side of them was insistent, pulling at attention with small reminders, like the way Claire paused near his desk, watching him finish a report, or how Ethan found excuses to discuss minor projects with her just to hear her voice, and the unspoken question hovered between them: could a connection so natural exist outside the strict lines of the workplace? Or was it destined to remain a fleeting curiosity? A moment carried up 20 floors that had left hearts racing, but lives otherwise unchanged. Yet the heart does not easily respect rules, and as the week progressed, Claire found herself thinking about Ethan when the office was quiet, remembering the warmth of his hands when he steadied her, the calm reassurance in his voice when he refused to put her down, and realizing with a startling clarity that her feelings were no longer purely professional, that admiration had quietly become something more tender, something that tugged at her chest with longing, while Ethan, too, wrestled with emotions he could not name, feeling a pull toward Claire that went beyond respect, beyond gratitude, something deeper, something that made mundane office chatter feel charged. And when Friday arrived, and the building emptied faster than usual, Claire found herself walking toward Ethan's desk, heart beating unevenly, unsure if she should speak, yet compelled to bridge the distance that had formed in days of silent acknowledgement. And when she finally reached him, she said softly, "You never complained, not once," her voice carrying vulnerability she usually hid, and Ethan's chest tightened at the words, and he replied with a quiet sincerity, "You mattered," and in that exchange, a door opened, a space where honesty and longing could exist. Without judgment, and though neither dared to speak more, the weight of their feelings hovered like a silent promise, lingering through the weekend as both replayed the moment in their minds, each step, each glance, each unspoken sentiment, wondering what it could mean, fearing its intensity, but secretly wishing it would not fade. And when Monday arrived, Claire called Ethan into her office, the air heavy with anticipation, her hands folded, her expression composed yet softer than usual, and as he entered, heart pounding, she closed the door and began, "I don't want to make this uncomfortable," pausing to measure the impact of her words, "but I don't want to ignore it either." And in that instant, the office walls felt distant, the title of boss and employee irrelevant, leaving only two people standing with honesty hanging between them, a quiet, delicate truth waiting for acknowledgement. And then, in a voice that carried courage and vulnerability all at once, she asked the question that shifted everything: "Would you like to have dinner with me?" And Ethan felt the world tilt slightly, a mix of surprise, relief, and excitement coursing through him, and as he nodded, words failing him, both understood that this simple invitation was more than a meal. It was a crossing of lines, a step into vulnerability, a chance to explore the connection born of 20 floors, shared effort, and unexpected trust, a chance that could lead to something profound, a journey that neither of them could have planned, but both were suddenly eager to begin, because some bonds are undeniable, some moments unforgettable, and some questions, softly asked, hold the power to change the course of a life forever. The evening Ethan arrived at the small, quiet restaurant, he felt a nervous energy he hadn't experienced in years, the city lights outside the windows casting a soft glow that made everything feel intimate. And when Claire appeared a few minutes later, elegant yet relaxed, with a smile that was warm and genuine, he realized this was unlike any meeting, any dinner, any conversation they had ever shared, because tonight there were no office walls, no deadlines, no expectations, just two people standing on the edge of something new. And as they sat across from each other, menus untouched, they began to talk, first about small, safe things, weekend plans, favorite books, childhood memories, but quickly, the conversation deepened, moving naturally into dreams they had long abandoned, mistakes they had made, regrets they carried quietly, and Ethan felt the ease of talking with someone who listened not just to words, but to pauses, to inflections, to the emotion behind each sentence, while Claire discovered she could speak freely without judgment, laughing at moments of awkwardness, sighing at confessions she had never shared with anyone else, and with every story, every memory, the invisible barrier of boss and employee faded, replaced by something warmer, more human, more real, because they were no longer bound by hierarchy, but connected by honesty and trust, and at one point, Claire reached across the table, lightly touching his hand, saying softly, "That day, you reminded me I don't have to carry everything alone," and Ethan's heart swelled at the words, feeling a quiet pride and an undeniable connection, and he replied, "You reminded me that courage isn't loud," both realizing that strength was not just in physical acts, but in vulnerability, in letting someone see who you truly were. And as the evening progressed, their laughter grew easier, their smiles brighter, conversations flowing without hesitation, shifting from the past to hopes for the future, dreams of travel, favorite meals, memories that shaped them, noticing in the smallest gestures, the way she twirled her fork, the way he tilted his head when listening, that their hearts were aligning, creating a rhythm only they could feel. And when dessert came, it was secondary, almost unnecessary, because the real sweetness was in the conversation, in the shared glances, in the moments where words failed and understanding took over. And as they left the restaurant, stepping into the cool night air, the city alive with lights and distant sounds, they walked side by side, the familiar distance between boss and employee replaced by a gentle closeness, a tentative yet thrilling connection, and for a moment, they paused by the building where it all began, the same tower, the same 20 floors, now a memory of how courage, care, and trust had brought them together. And Claire smiled at Ethan, softly, without expectation, and said, "Thank you for tonight," and he simply shook his head, smiling back, realizing no thanks were needed, because the evening had changed both of them, opened their hearts, and created a new chapter neither had anticipated but both were eager to explore, knowing that sometimes love does not arrive with fireworks or grand gestures, but quietly, gently, through shared moments, through trust, through simple acts that reveal the depth of feeling. And as they parted that night, each carrying the memory of the other, the city lights reflected in their eyes, and both understood that whatever came next, it would be real, it would be meaningful, and it would be worth every step, every moment, every shared heartbeat, because sometimes the most profound beginnings are found not in dramatic declarations, but in quiet dinners, honest conversations, and the courage to let someone in.